Welcome to Understanding the Bible. This is episode 24, God's Law and Israel. Last time we talked about the sacrificial system and how that was a miracle in and of itself, the forgiveness of sins, the atonement, which means payment for sin in order to restore a relationship. This time we're going to go over some stuff in Leviticus. And if you remember, Leviticus contains most of the 613 laws that are in the Torah that fundamental Jews believe they must follow. So remember, the Torah is the Old Testament Hebrew, and the first 5 books is the Pentateuch: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So Numbers is basically about the wilderness wandering and then the laws that God gave them. First thing we're going to cover in this is God in the Holy of Holies. Numbers 7, verse 89. It said, "When Moses was gone into the tabernacle of the congregation to speak with him, then he heard the voice of one speaking unto him from off the mercy seat that was upon the ark of testimony from between the 2 cherubims, and he spake unto him." God literally spoke from the mercy seat, the Ark of the Covenant, sitting on top of that. There was a seat there and 2 cherubims, one on each side, facing them, made out of gold. And Moses, and this went all the way up until the time of Jesus, is that God was supposed to meet the Levites, the actual high priest, in that place if they had done proper atonement, and if they were in alignment with God's will, God would meet the high priest there. So Moses served that function for a while. And remember, Moses was of the tribe of Levi, so, as Aaron was. It's just Moses, that was not his main goal in life, to be a priest. Aaron began the priesthood. Then, of course, we had the pillar of cloud that everyone saw. In Numbers 9, it talks about it more, verse 15 through 17. "And on the day that the tabernacle was reared up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, namely the tent of the testimony. And at even there was upon the tabernacle, as it were, the appearance of fire until the morning." So, not necessarily the pillar of fire like the Egyptians saw that separated them from the Jews before the parting of the Red Sea, but it said the appearance of fire until the morning. So I don't know what that was. It could have been a pillar. It could have just been a glow that looked like burning something. It could have been like the burning bush that Moses saw, except over the whole tent. I have no idea. And remember, the tent is really a very elaborate building that was called the tabernacle, that had like 20 pillars made out of brass holding up the sides of it. And not to mention the tent in the middle, and then the Holy of Holies in the middle of that, or on the end of that. So this tabernacle was several layers, if you will. And that's where God lived. Tabernacle literally means dwelling place. So that was God's home. All right. So that's why today you'll hear people talk about church as the house of God, even though it's not the same as the tabernacle was. But that's the point of it. Okay. And then verse 17, it says, "And when the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, then after that the children of Israel journeyed, and in the place where the cloud abode, there the children of Israel pitched their tents." So God made himself known to the whole people, not just to the high priest or Moses. All right, then we have the fire of God and the judgment. Numbers 11, verse 1, "And when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them, and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them." Here we have the theme of judgment. And there's a lot of that in the Pentateuch, in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. But I'm not going to focus on that today. We already covered that in the sacrificial system. Just be aware that part of the fear of the Lord that we ought to have is not merely respect that people talk about in modern day churches. It is fear of the judgment, the fire of the Lord burning and killing people because of their sin. So it is not merely respect of God that is the fear of the Lord. We need to also have actual, honest to God, fear of his judgment. Okay. All right. Next, I wanted to go into the mixed multitude in the next verse, Numbers 11. And it says, "And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? So they were tired of eating manna, okay? We remember the fish, which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers, and the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes." Now, I want to point out several places in regards to the mixed multitude. These were people who came with them out of Egypt. Maybe other slaves, maybe other Egyptians. Regardless, there was a huge group of people that were not Jews. And that's the point of this. And there's a lesson here in regards to immigrants, because a lot of people bring this stuff up because they say, if you don't want immigrants, illegal immigrants in your country, breaking in over the border and stuff, that you're not really a Christian, because the Bible tells you to love those who are among you. That is way wrong. Okay, so the lesson on immigrants here is these people assimilated with the Jews. They followed the laws of the people that they joined. They worshiped the God of the people that they joined. And what this teaches us, the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, is that when you don't assimilate and follow the laws of the people that you're with, you bring discord and trouble. It causes separation among the people, them versus us. Not to mention doubting as to the culture and the God and the laws, because these people don't assimilate and don't want to follow those. So this lesson here is not to love the immigrant, especially the illegal. This lesson here is, if you want to become an immigrant, you must do it legally, follow the laws, and worship the God of the land that you're going into. That's the lesson if you're going to follow the Bible. All right? But the real lesson here is the lessons on adoption. The physical adoption of, even in regular life. Like if 2 parents adopt a child from someone else, that physical adoption, that's what these people did. They adopted or accepted people into the tribes of Israel, right? But it also brings up the spiritual adoption of following God and becoming one of God's children, even though you weren't before. Galatians 4:3 talks about this. "Even so we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world." So it's drawing a parallel to the bondage of the Jews in Egypt, right? And then it says, "But when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons." So now we have people following the laws of God, but they are not yet his children until they are redeemed by Jesus Christ. God sent forth his Son, right? Verse 6, "And because you are sons," there you go. So you were under bondage. You were not a child. You just followed the laws, and then you became redeemed, and now you are sons. "God hath sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Wherefore thou art no more a servant, but a son. And if a son, then an heir of God through Christ." This is really cool. The fact that from the very beginning, at the inception of the nation of Israel, the 12 tribes that became Israel, okay, that this spiritual adoption is represented here when he talks about the mixed multitude. Now, in this particular passage that we were reading, Numbers 11, it was how they were bad and didn't do the right thing and didn't worship God, right? But elsewhere it talks about how they do. Even Moses' wife was one who followed God. So there's lots of different things in here, but understand that the dissatisfaction, the lust that they had, they wanted the bondage again. Well, that's a whole nother thing about sin. People are rescued from the bondage of sin when you accept Jesus Christ, and yet we still lust after the things that we used to have, whether it's pride, selfishness, anything, gluttony, whatever else you may have. We still want to do those things, even though we've become adopted and are no longer under the bondage to that, right? So then God judges like a father disciplines his child. Numbers 11:9. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. And then here comes the judgment. And it comes in a way that you wouldn't expect. God gives the people what they asked for, but so much that they got sick. Skip ahead to verse 31. It says, and there went forth a wind from the Lord and brought quails from the sea. Remember, they were sick of the manna. They wanted meat, right? And let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and as it were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. And the people stood up all that day, and all that night, and all the next day, and gathered the quails. He that gathered least gathered 10 homers. And they spread them all abroad for themselves round about the camp. Check this out. They don't have refrigerators. They're living in the wilderness out of tents. How much meat can you eat and smoke and keep in the open air like that? 10 homers each? Let me just Google that real quick. How much is an omer? How much was an omer in biblical times? 8 bushels. An omer is a large unit of dry measure, roughly equivalent to 8 bushels or 220 liters, normally used for measuring grain and other goods. 10 of them. 80 bushels each of quail. Why would they keep that? Why wouldn't they bury it outside? Why wouldn't they get rid of it? Burn it. You can't eat 80 bushels of meat before it goes bad. This is how lustful and gluttonous these people were. And I understand, you're hungry and you want meat after you haven't had meat for God knows how long. It might have been a couple years. Wandering through the wilderness and just eating manna every freaking day in and day out. It might have been delicious. Well, obviously it was, but I understand wanting something different, right? I would probably grab a stick and a quail and cook it over the fire and just char it and start eating it right away. I can understand eating 1 or 2 quails immediately and then wanting to cook a few more and saving them for the next day. And, I get that. But 80 bushels for you? That's insane. And that's he that gathered the least. So this just shows the lust and the gluttony and the irrational discontent that they had, that they would gather that many quail. And then look at Numbers 11, verse 33. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of that place Kibroth-Hattaavah, because there they buried the people that lusted. Well, there you go. Now, I don't know if there were a few that didn't do this and didn't go crazy, or if it was just the kids that survived. But God started killing them while they were chewing the meat because they made it obvious. You think of back in the day when cigarettes were cool, and dad catches a kid smoking and he's like, you know what? We're going to go out back and you're going to smoke cigarettes until you're sick. And he'd make you smoke, 2 packs until you were vomiting all over the place and couldn't handle it. So you'd get sick of the cigarettes, right? This is what God did with the quail. Guaranteed those people hated the thought of eating quail after this. Well, then we move on. Remember, the people that started this was the mixed multitude, right? But I want you to show how the Bible clearly does not teach racism, because that's another thing. It's funny how the media and the left and academia in America like to say that God loved immigrants here, and they use this passage. And then at the same point, they'll turn around and say, well, the Bible's racist. It teaches racism. It only loves the Jews, or they were allowed to slaughter people that were different races or have slaves of people that were different races. So God's racist, but God loves the immigrants. Like the hypocrisy and the disjointed arguments that they make to try and argue that God and Christianity and the Bible is always wrong is just stupid. But to prove that God was against racism, check this out. This is pretty cool. Numbers 12, verse 1. And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses. Why? His brother and sister. Okay? Because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. They were spreading rumors and falsehoods and talking against Moses, their leader that saved them from slavery. Why? Because he married someone that was not a Jew. We're talking probably dark black, foreigner, clearly different from them, right? So why did they say that was bad? Well, they used the argument that the left does, probably. I mean, it seems to me that, God told them to marry people of their own race. Of course, this was after Moses had already led the people out of Egypt. But God wanted the purity of their bloodline for the 12 tribes to establish the kingdom. Okay? And here, Moses had not done that. Obviously in the past, because he did it years ago before he ever came back to Egypt. He had gone out there and lived for a few years with this woman and raised children. Okay? So this law about the Jews marrying Jews within their tribe was not the same thing back then. But so they were ticked off and they're like, you shouldn't be married to this person. She's a foreigner. She's got different colored skin, or whatever they said, right? In other words, racism. Okay? Verse 2. And they said, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? So trying to make themselves more important than Moses, because Moses was married to an Ethiopian. And then look at the end of verse 2. And the Lord heard it. Oh, well, of course he did. Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, Come out ye three unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. And the Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. And he said, Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, and I will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all mine house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. And the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? So he's saying, look, I talk face to face to Moses. He's seen me. How dare you speak against him, right? And then verse 9, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. So it looks like multiple sins there, a little bit of pride, selfishness, wanting to exalt themselves above Moses, to be powerful, to be in the public eye maybe. But clearly they made those arguments off of racism. She's an Ethiopian. Okay. And they said in verse 12, Let her, Miriam, not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed when he cometh out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, Heal her now, O God, I beseech thee. And the Lord said unto Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed for 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received again. So God's saying, look, she had leprosy. I've already made the laws. I mean, even if you got spit on your face, you'd have to be apart from the people for 7 days. Well, she had leprosy over her whole body, so put her apart from the people for 7 days. Verse 15, and Miriam was shut out from... Sorry, that's my alarm to exercise every hour, so let me get back to this. Verse 15, and Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. And afterward, the people removed from Hazeroth and pitched in the wilderness of Paran. So, number one here, God's not racist. Clearly, she was a foreigner. She was not a Jew. She had different skin tone, facial features. God approved of her, clearly, because he punished the people who despised Moses, right? Who condemned Moses for marrying her. So anyone who claims racism is taught in the Bible just hasn't read the Bible, all right? God does not look on the outward appearances. If you look at, it goes all the way back to when the first king of Israel is anointed, or the second king of Israel was anointed as well. But King Saul, the first king, 1 Samuel 16:1, the Lord said unto Samuel, how long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil, and go, I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. Verse 6, so this is about King David, sorry. And it came to pass when they were come that he looked on Eliab, and said, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, or the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Outward appearance doesn't matter. Got it? All right. And then the other thing we have in here to teach us is how God chooses prophets, or at least how he chose them in the past, right? Numbers 12:6-8 said, and he said, hear now my words, if there be a prophet among you, I will make known unto him in a vision, and will speak in dreams. But my servant Moses is not like this. He's been faithful in all mine house, and I'll speak to him face to face, not in dark speeches. So God made it clear dreams and visions were from him, okay? Moses was different. He was just a faithful man. He was not a prophet. He was of the order of Levi, or the tribe of Levi, a priest. God would speak and let him see his face, his likeness. That's what similitude means. And God specifically said, I will not speak in dark speeches to him. Now, that's actually from a word that means puzzles, riddles, or hard questions. And when he said apparent speech, that means clear. So understand that Moses was different. Dreams and visions are sometimes hard to understand. Remember Pharaoh, when Joseph interpreted the dream, 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty. Well, the Pharaoh couldn't understand the dream, and neither could any of his wise men. Because dreams sometimes are in riddles. Sometimes they're hard to understand, and it takes a discerning person of God to be able to understand what it means. So God was making it clear that Moses is your leader. He's different. I'm going to speak clearly to him. Here's the conclusion to all this. The miracle of God revealing himself to humans physically was undeniable. It was freaking huge. Everybody saw it. And how to become a child of God, the lessons on adoption are awesome here. And then it's used throughout all the Bible, through Jesus's lifetime and then the disciples afterwards, that it's becoming heirs of God, being adopted by God, even if we were not one of the original chosen people that God spoke to directly, like Moses, right? Look at Romans 8:14. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, who we know is the only Son of God, right? So every other heir or son of God is a joint heir by adoption. So race doesn't matter to God. He chooses who he will choose. God makes prophets. He reveals himself to those prophets. And we need to understand that through all of this in the book of Numbers and the whole Pentateuch is that we shouldn't chase miracles. We should be chasing God. We need to strive to be faithful to God and his word. That's the main lesson right there for today. Don't chase miracles. Yes, God does miracles, but the dreams and visions, don't chase after that. Just be faithful like Moses was. Thank you for listening, and keep searching for truth. All right, I want to go into something real quick here, a Bible study thing called types. And what that means is a type is a resemblance or a pattern. It, by implication, is an analogy to something else. And the one I wanted to bring up that we've talked about before is Melchizedek. In Genesis 14:18, it says, "And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God. And then Abraham gave him tithes." So this was before the nation of Israel. Abraham had the promise from God, and he found a priest of the Most High God named Melchizedek and gave him tithes. If you read Hebrews 7, and I'd encourage you to read all of Hebrews 7, verse 3, it says, "Without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually." That was Jesus Christ. So, priest after the order of Melchizedek. Okay? And Adam is another type. The first Adam, Romans 5:14 says, "Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over them that had not sinned, after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who is the figure of him that was to come." Now, the Greek word for figure is tupos, which is type. It's where we get the word type, a shape or a pattern, a resemblance of something else. So here it's saying that Adam at the very beginning was a type, a figure of Jesus Christ in Romans chapter 5. So we've covered types in the story of Exodus. The Passover lamb is a type of Jesus. That's why Jesus later is referred to as the Lamb of God. Moses freed God's people from slavery. Same thing as Jesus. He frees us from the bondage of sin. Priests, the whole Levitical structure that we've covered there. Christ is that one priest after the order of Melchizedek that is the only mediator between God and man now. We no longer have need of a high priest. And then later we're going to go over the type, that bronze serpent that Moses raised up to cure the people from the snake bites. And all they had to do was make their way to the bronze serpent that was raised up on that brass rod. And that was just like Christ raised up on the cross, that in order to be freed from sin, we look to him. There's lots of types in the Bible, and it's not a prophecy. It's a foreshadowing of something that is to come in the future. So it's a very interesting literary thing that is used, and yet it's not literature. It is clearly God's sovereignty working out his plan in history to give clues to people of what is to come. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, email me, angrypatriot42@yahoo.com. Keep searching for truth.